Hey, everybody. I am here with the co-founder and CEO of Mintlify, Han. Han, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Mummy, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I'm really excited to talk to you because I feel like I use Mintlify a lot in like a lot of the docs that I look up. Like, it's a very unique way of structuring stuff. And so I'm excited to hear more about like what you all do. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we work with companies that I'm sure you've also worked with or tried the products of to build their developer-facing documentation. So if you've been on Anthropic's docs, Cursor's docs, Replit's now, Perplexity's, there's a list
Yeah.
of companies. We have the pleasure and the privilege of powering their entire docs, and now not only doing public stuff but also internal docs as well.
That's really cool. So I saw on your website you guys did 7 pivots before you came to Mintlify. Is that right?
Yeah, 7 whole pivots. It's crazy because yes, it's been 7 pivots over the span of about the first year and a half of the business.
Yeah.
But it's funny because thinking back to our story, it never really felt like they were that like massive pivots,
I see.
because me and my co-founder, when we started the company, just very simply did it on the premise of like not an idea, which I know some people tend to. We were like, we just want to build for people that we really care about.
That's
Right.
cool.
And we realized it was very quickly that it was just other developers. It was other builders, people who are like us. Because, the cheat code of building for something that you care about was just, building for yourself. And we were like, let's build a company around doing this, because we know that if we do that, you'll be able to kind of sustain the downs, the many downs during the 10-year journey that it would take to obviously build anything significant. And so we just were like, let's build for developers, and then pivoted 6 or 7 times across very different ideas. But the core root of what we're serving for and who we're doing it for maintained the same. And so it felt like 7 pivots for sure, because, no idea change that required throwing away your entire code base and, ditching all that entire idea ever felt good. But it never was like, oh, we did fintech one day, we did logistics the other, and then developer tools. It was all very rooted in a very similar problem space.
That makes total sense. So tell me a little bit, how did you maintain your momentum and motivation through this? Like, a year and a half is a lot to try to figure out, is this going to work or not? Like, was it basically this idea like you mentioned of like, hey, I really like developer tools. We really want to serve developers and we're going to keep going until we find it. Like, what kept you going?
So I think for us, staying rooted in the type of people that we were building for has probably been the biggest difference in kind of keeping all the momentum. And it's really funny because the reason why we chose to focus on this audience was actually related to a previous startup that both me and my co-founder Han started. And that startup was the one we did before this. I very vividly remember waking up one morning and just thinking that I felt like I was building for people that I didn't really care about. For context, it was a startup. This was like the most COVID idea ever. It was about during COVID, how there were like all these like different community startups building like support for your customer community, your advocates, all of that stuff. I remember I just woke up one day and I was like, I just don't feel excited about the space, and I just didn't really empathize with the people that we were building for. And so the next time something like really hard happened, like kind of this existential crisis to the business, I was just like, I just don't feel that attached to it. And it made kind of calling quits, frankly, a lot easier. Right.
I see.
And so when we started this company, we were very almost pre-optimizing against that, because we were like, okay, that's what kills companies. You have to do something that, because there's going to be many, many existential crises, like once a week, and if you aren't rooted or anchored in something that can have you ride through the tough waves, it's just going to be a tough time, and you're not going to make it through, the number of years that it'll take. And so, yeah, it was a year and a half of just chewing glass while wandering in the desert for us, for sure. And every pivot sucked. I will always very vividly remember the nights when I was in New York City. So, where you're in Manhattan, and there was just nights I couldn't sleep because we were just in the midst of winding down our last idea. And I was like, how am I going to make this work? How do I explain this to?
Yeah, tell me about how the transition then. Tell me a little bit about what happened, or how did you guys land on Mintlify as an idea, And
Yeah.
give me a little idea of like what those early days looked like that you were starting to get like crazy traction pretty quickly.
Yeah. So it was the funny story, and and of course I tell this, to me, and please, don't tell anyone else, obviously. It's not like this will be public or anything. Is that when we initially started Mintlify, very candidly, we weren't too sure about the idea.
Mm,
Like it wasn't the most obvious thing. Because and it's something that actually it's funny because like during the 7 or 8 pivots, in the early days, this was something that definitely came up, right? We were doing interviews for our other products and they brought this idea up. They're like, hey, like, I'm not happy with the current docs platform, or I'm not currently happy with the docs. I wish there was something better. And we heard that a few times, but it was like, like you can always build it yourself. There's a few
right.
options in the market. Like, there's probably something you can do here. And frankly, it wasn't until the very last idea that we tried, like just completely flopped. And it was just like literally one of those things where like we spent like months thinking and we were like, this is going to be like the home run. This is like a great idea. Here's why
Yeah.
here's why we think people love it. And that one flopped the hardest. And we spent so much time. And we're like, at that point, we we're kind of out of ideas. We're like, you know what? Like, I
Yeah.
think they were right. Like when we were building products ourselves, we tried every single one of the, other options out there, for building your docs. We've also done, the in-house route, and we know how much that sucked. Let's
Right.
maybe take that thing that we've heard seriously for a second and just build the thing that we've always wanted, you know?
Yeah.
And the funny story to that was I like to believe that, sometimes you should just like, to like allocate your time properly, you should kind of spend as much time, or at least I did, I mean, less so nowadays. You should allocate the number of time you feel confident about something. So for instance, if you're like, for sure it's going to work, probably take it very seriously. For this idea, we were like, let's give it 2 days, over a weekend,
Okay.
because we weren't sure about it,
Yeah.
you know? But we're like, let's just, as developers, build the thing that we would have always loved. Let's just focus on doing that. And we've heard it enough. Let's just go. And we've
Yeah.
known what the other options are like. Let's just build the one that we've always loved. We did that over
So
the
what
span of
was
a
that?
weekend. Yeah.
Yeah, what was that unique insight for the thing that you guys always loved that people weren't doing? Like, what
Yeah.
does Mintlify do so differently than all the other tools out there that, gets
Yeah.
customers so excited?
Yeah. I think it really came down to fundamentally this one thing for us, which is just developer obsession.
Hmm.
I think there's a longer list of things that I can speak about
Sure.
the product and the quality of it all. But I think the right bet that we made very early on was just deeply betting on the developer. The very simple idea was, there were all these different platforms that were trying to almost get developers out of the question. They're like, oh, they're too busy building,
Mm,
code. They shouldn't be touching the docs. They shouldn't be maintaining it. Whereas at the same time, we were hearing from like, the companies who do it the best, like Stripe, and they were saying that it was like a developer heavy culture around managing content. They were like, developers are the ones updating it. They're shipping it alongside their PRs with the code base, And we were like, yeah, like we as developer ourselves, because you're the ones building the platform, you're probably the best people maintaining it, and you're likely the audience who's reading it, you know,
right.
like
Right.
that's who you should be focused on. And we just stuck with an obsession in that. And that meant a bunch of different product decisions that really turns out resonated with the market.
So tell me about these early days. You launched it in a week. You built it in a week.
Yeah.
Did you launch it to a set of customers? What did that look like initially?
So our very first customer, and I'm sure no one ever forgets this, is I'll forever remember like the first 5 customers forever, and especially the very first one. And the very first one for me was literally my roommate, who at the time was this another YC founder. And once I built out the prototype, I literally just like went to him and I was like, dude, like, like here's this new thing we're trying out. Oh, by the way, I ported over your current docs on our platform now. So here's what it looks like. Here's before and
Right.
after. Do you think it looks better? And I think he was just like, yeah, like I think it looks like, like pretty good. I like the experience of it here and there. And I was like, all right, Ben, I'm just gonna set it up for you. And so I literally just went to his DNS like on his computer and just installed it for him.
Sure. Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
I just like, there's the whole, call us and install thing. I just did it. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, now using us, like,
Nice.
and the really funny thing was, we kind of like we were like we just got it out there, and we didn't have any of the basic functionalities that you would expect from us to even make it work. Like even making an
Yeah.
update, like changing a page, you literally couldn't do
Yeah.
that. It
Yeah.
was at the time the most crappiest version it could possibly have been, which was just like a static site basically.
Yeah.
And we just shipped it, and then we gave it to him. And I literally remember, it was so funny. Like after we launched that and it got a lot of traction, we're like, oh, this thing's picking up steam. Let's go and actually go build the functionality for them to make these updates. And it probably took us like 3 weeks or so to actually build a system around it. And I literally remember the day after it launched, the company, my roommate's company came back to us and was like, "Oh, guys, by the way, I forgot to ask. We were looking to make an update. Could we do that?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah,
Right.
of course,
Yeah,
of
of
course.
course.
Yeah, we didn't have it set up for you guys earlier, but here you go."
Of course.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We literally launched the day before.
Oh, that's cool.
So
take me back to the future or back to the present. Like, what does the company look like now? Where are you guys located? What does the team look like? Love to get a sense of just like, what's the feel of Mintlify at this point?
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly a lot of growth, happened since then. And now, obviously, the privilege of, growing the company. Now we work with, over 5,000 companies. I know we mentioned, earlier, the few of the ones that we're very excited and, honored to work with. We're based in San Francisco. We are an in-person company. Made that decision mostly out of preference for in-person, and really small and scrappy. Right now we only have 16 people, which, as it turns out, is very small if you're working with 5,000, different companies and so forth. And so, obviously, one of the big priorities of the company right now is just recruiting. And obviously, been using, Wellfound,
Awesome.
and the wonderful stuff you guys have built.
How do you, with such a small team and such a large user base, like how is that possible these days? Is it that like AI has made things a lot easier, like especially around customer support and stuff? I'm sure with 5,000 customers, things go wrong. Yeah. Love to hear about that.
Oh, I mean, big time. It's really funny, right? Because right now you definitely do see and hear of these crazy companies who are operating at an insane scale with like a team of 20 people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we're very fortunate to work with the team at Cursor, and it's really mind-boggling. Obviously witnessing their kind of growth. I think like 25, maybe 30 people at most for the business they're doing. I think that there's certainly a part of it that AI is playing into it. Like it's helping, make developers more efficient. It's helping with support. It's helping with a ton of other things. But I really fundamentally think it's just this, it just speaks to kind of like how much, like a product can really scale and grow as a function in general. Yeah. Like you build a good product and you focus on the fundamentals of the product, and turns out you really don't need that many people to do it.
Yeah. That's
I think is kind of the real secret sauce of it. That being said though, like it's funny because we're personally witnessing this kind of experience ourselves where like, I recently made a LinkedIn post about this experiment that we're running. We hired a fairly technical person to run our support strategy, and his name is Dean. And Dean kind of came in and absolutely just started crushing tickets until he eventually realized that nowadays a lot of the AI agents for building support is actually quite spectacular and can do a really good job at it. So he's now kind of committed to being not only the first, but also the last hire that we make in this. So he helped us set up a lot of the agents. And so a lot of the support now is like, partially, if not fully automated. And I think you're starting to see this a lot across many different functions where someone who's just able to work with AI agents is able to come in and just really figure out how to build the infrastructure around it. And you don't need to build a support team of, let's say, 10 people anymore. Now you can just get one person who knows how to build agents. And I think you're going to start to probably see more of this just happening across. And I think it's only going to cut down the need of having more folks on the team.
Talk to me a little bit about, what's your pitch to candidates when you're getting them to join? Why is Mintlify a great place to work?
Well, once you figure it out, definitely let me know. I like to think it's a few things. I think the very nature of I think it's just a startup on steroids, in my opinion. Obviously, everything that I think a lot of candidates are looking for, who are naturally drawn to startups, is high ownership, high responsibility, moving fast. We take that philosophy and turn that into overdrive at Mintlify, which is we very much also believe in having a small team. We very much believe in having individuals who, when they come in, they're able to own products and own projects. And we very fundamentally built a small team and, kind of accommodate for that. And so even the folks that we have at Mintlify very much optimized and, you know, uh, you know, geared towards it.
So talk to me a little bit about the culture itself. So it seems like
Yeah.
that is one of the pieces of like ownership, agency, growth,
Yeah.
owning products end to end. What are the other
Yeah.
things that you guys really care about when it comes to company culture or just the way you work?
Yeah.
Like, what are the behaviors that, do really
Yeah.
well at Mintlify versus what are the behaviors that don't fit at Mintlify?
Yeah. I think one culture that we particularly emphasize is just empathy in general. And that really conveys to not only within the team, but also with our customers. Like we're a very customer obsessed company. We take each and every customer that we work with very seriously and we prioritize their requests. I think that partially speaks to both me and Hanbi and like our just deep love for building for people that we care about and that we can relate to. And like, for instance, we build for developers. We're developers ourselves. We build for other startups. We're a startup ourselves. And a lot of the problems that we find ourselves having just so closely relates to our customers that it's really difficult, first of all, not to build a company around that. I think the product also helps in a lot of ways because it's such a public facing product. You have to build, like, I think the way we think about ourselves is like we're almost like a white dress shirt, like kind of equivalent as a product for companies, where it's like we want you to be dressed well, and if there's something wrong with that white dress shirt, it's a bad reflection on you.
And that's really interesting because like, does it affect how you guys develop, right? Like if you go down, you're going down to like the front door of like a lot of companies. How does that affect how you make sure things are stable and work well and stuff?
Yeah. That's just funny enough because that's one thing that we were very surprised by. I mean, I don't know why we were, but we certainly shouldn't be surprised that people care this much about their talks.
Yeah.
But every time like we have a minor incidents, it feels very serious.
Sure.
Like people start channeling us, they get really angry, and then we have to deeply profusely apologize. Because when as it turns out, like I think this is the philosophy that we preach is like, your communication strategy of your product, right? Like your docs being a part of that is part of the product, right?
Yeah.
Like imagine what happens if, Stripe docs go down for a day,
Yeah, huge problem. I mean, if project docs go down, it's like, cool, I can't build today because I don't know how to use this one thing.
Exactly.
I'm annoyed. I'm emailing them. They're emailing you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a step degree away from like the project not being there at all.
Right, exactly.
and so I think so it feels like that when you're running, which is not what we were expecting, right? Like sometimes when these incidents happen, it feels like, like people get really, really pissed off.
Right.
And so we obviously put a lot of thought into making sure these things don't happen.
What about like this year? Like, what are you most excited about? Or like, what are the big milestones that are coming up? Or what are you guys building that you want to see put out in the next few months?
Yeah. I think this year in general, we have a very strong thesis around, thesis is the wrong word. I hate that. It's just a VC buzzword. Strong belief, let's say that, around the idea that like AI is going to change the way people write and maintain content, not just docs. So I'll give you a good example of what that means. So even today, we think that like docs are 50% for humans, 50% for LLMs. And that change happened fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, what used to just be obviously written for people, now the content is being used to fine tune, support agents. They're, indexed by the LLMs themselves. And people now add them, for instance, to their, their cursors, their, windsurfs, their like, IDEs now to, fine tune and everything. And the list goes on. We think it's going to be like 2080, by the end of the year for starters. And so first of all, really optimizing for the LLM, use case is just like a fundamentally like increasingly more important part of the business. But I think more exciting to that, and I think more importantly, is I think the way people fundamentally build and interact content is going to change. I have a very strong belief that by the end of the year, the idea of like self-maintaining, self-updating content is going to be a thing.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if it doesn't happen.
Right.
I think the only question is who's going to do it, and hopefully we're in a position and able to execute on that. But
how do you think about that in general? It's interesting, right? Because almost the entire ground under you is shifting, and in the sense that, like,
Yeah.
yeah, you probably went from zero LLMs reading your stuff and using it to now
Yeah.
50%, and it's going to be even more than that. Obviously, it seems like you guys are like jumping on this and want to be the people that drive it and kind of be at the forefront of it. Um, So how do you maintain your sanity here? Because it's really interesting, right? Because you guys started one place, it was
Yeah.
0% LLMs. Now it's 50%. It's going to be 80%. You're going to basically
Yeah.
change the way your entire like product and market is working. Like, it's interesting because we're also in a similar place, right? Because we help people find engineers, and
Yeah.
it's a question of like, how is engineering going to
Yeah.
look in the next few years? There's a lot of questions around
Yeah.
that, and so it's been an interesting experience for us as well. But yeah, like, how do you think about kind of maintaining your sanity as a founder in these kind of like big swings where there's huge upside, but also like huge changes happening?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think as companies should, it's just a matter of, like adopting and learning about how, like how all of this is potentially going to shape the markets and your role in, to play in it. I think that the one thing I always say is that I think what's rooted in Mintlify that I think is, very important at all these great companies, it's really rooted in a problem less so than a solution, right? Like when we started Mintlify, it was always around building for developers. And, we have a company of a motto of, like empowering builders, for instance, right? That's like what the company is ultimately about. And like, for
Right.
instance, we view documentation being a part of that, right? But
Right.
like, let's not kid ourselves. Documentation is just, walls of text, pages, just pages on the
Right.
internet, right? In the age of LLMs, when we think that that's going to, and that's changing developer behavior, developers are increasingly using AI to kind of build and learn and how to, and develop their skills and figure out how to use a product, right? Obviously, that's going to have a role in how this problem gets solved. And our view as a business is kind of to adopt that, to figure out how that's going to play in terms of solving the problem, right? In a world where like, people can just like telepathically get all the information about how to work with Stripe's SDK,
Yeah.
I think everyone would opt for that. And maybe that's what we would
Sure.
be building then, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I view it. And
Yeah.
I think not only that, the one thing that I've been certainly surprised by is when we started the company, this whole, like we didn't know on how big of a role we would end up playing in this
Right.
AI ecosystem that we are today. And so, of course, I think there's always a serendipity in terms of finding yourselves and opportunities and making the most out of it, that I also think is super important as well.
That's awesome. Well, Han, it's been awesome to hear more about Mintlify and learn about you and your journey. If people want to learn more about the company, where should they go?
Yeah, just check us out at mintlify.com.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thanks so much.